everybody! Welcome to GivReads. My name is Andrew Givler. I am an author, YouTuber, and booktuber, which keeps me up at night because I like to stay busy. And here on this channel, we discuss everything from reading to writing to storytelling and everything in between. And today we're going to do something that I thought might be really fun. I've compiled a whole bunch of videos of famous authors talking about advice for writing. We're gonna watch them. I'm gonna react to them. I'm gonna give you my thoughts on them. Now, most of these people, by all means, are much better at writing, much more experienced than me. I've published one book, they've published many, but we're still gonna talk about it, experience it. We might agree, might disagree, but it's all meant to be educational and fun. If you guys find this helpful, find it interesting, do me a favor, hit the like button, okay? Also hit the subscribe button, help me grow this channel. We're trying to get it partnered, so that would be, that'd be a huge deal if you guys do that. And now, let's see what we got. This first one is a conversation between, apparently between Stephen King and George R.R. Martin. Let's see what we got. That's quite the roster.
How the do you write so many books so fast? Written 3 chapters, and you've finished 3 books in that time.
Yeah,
Here's
man.
the thing, okay? There are books and there are books. The way that I work, I try to get out there and I try to get 6 pages a day. When I'm working, I work every day, 3-4 hours, and I try to get those 6 pages and I try to get them fairly clean. So if the manuscript is, let's say, 360 pages long, that's basically 2 months' work. It's concentrated, but it's but that's assuming that it goes well.
And you do hit 6 pages a day?
I usually do.
You don't ever have a day where you sit down there and it's like constipation and you write a sentence and you hit the sentence and you check your email and you wonder if you had any talent after all and maybe you should have been a plumber.
I relate to this. So this is actually great. I've talked about this before. The best book I've ever read about writing was called On Writing. It's by Stephen King. And he says he writes about 2,000 words a day, which does come out to about roughly 6 pages. He calls anything less something where you get stuck in the slow creeping death. 2,000 words a day is about what I try to do, following his advice. Granted, it's not my full-time job. I don't always quite hit it. But I think that these are probably the kings of what is called plotters and pantsers. Plotters are authors who figure everything out before they start, right? They have outlines, they have robust outlines. And in some cases, they make the outline and they kind of like write out scenes and then they flesh out those scenes later. The outline becomes the book. Christopher Rocchio, who's a friend of mine who writes the Empire Silence Sun Eater series. If I'm not misremembering, I believe he said his outline is something like 30,000 words. That's a third of my book. Right now he writes bigger books, but like, you know, that's like a fourth of my book, really, more realistic. I'm a pantser. Pantser means we're flying by the seat of the pants. We know where we're going, we know what we're doing probably, but we're figuring out the stuff in between as we go. I think that's easier to write fast. Doesn't necessarily always come out as methodical, but yeah. That's really fun hearing the two of them talk about that. More Stephen King. Let's get it.
Now listen to me. What amazes me about
On writing. Yep. Oh, okay. This is about his
reading,
book.
like anything else, becomes rewarding the more that you do it. And the same people who understand that in physical endeavors like sports, anything like that, there's no gain without pain. They'll go and they'll hit the gym and they'll work out and do this and do the crunches and yell at each other. You feel the burn. Yeah, I Charlie horsed up. The same people say, I don't want to read a book. That's so hard. You know, if you do it an hour a day, it becomes something that's not only enjoyable, it becomes addictive, it becomes a part of your personality. And it's the readers in the world who become the writers. You cannot write unless you read.
I super agree with that. Not to toot my own horn. When I wrote my first book, a lot of people asked how I managed to do such a good job with the first book. Like, you know, my prose was coherent. It has its flaws, right? But like, for a first book, it's pretty solid. I read constantly. I read in my genre. I read out of my genre. I literally just finished rereading Red Rising before I filmed this video. When I'm happy, when my schedule's not overwhelming, I read at least an hour a day. I read good stories. I read bad stories. And when I'm done, I think about them. And I say what I like about it. When I hit a moment that doesn't resonate, I ask myself why. And that helps me write better stories. I 100% agree. Here we go. The king himself. Man, we're pulling from all the greats. Brandon Sanderson on opening lines. All right, I'm excited for this.
I think people stress about opening lines too much. This is a hill that I will be willing to maybe not die on, but at least take a few stabs upon. In high school, I remember taking a class where my teacher just emphasized opening lines so much.
Me too. Yep. I had a college professor who did that.
And granted, some of the great classics out there have some really killer opening lines. I do admire a great first line, but let's point out that your opening paragraph is more important than that, and I think your opening page is more important than your opening paragraph, and really your opening chapter is,
I agree with all that.
Key to this. In that same high school class, the teacher kind of got what she deserved in a way, because she taught us how much Opening lines were important. And then we went to do our essays. A group, not my group, but a group get up in front of the class, and the person who was presenting for them said, sex, 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 sex. Now that I have your attention, let me talk to you about race relations in the 1970s. They did grab attention, but then they had this really, I mean, it's kind of a funny joke, I'll admit that, but they had this really tense, interesting topic, kind of fraught with lots of nuance, and their opening did not display a lot of
bashed them over the head.
And so don't overemphasize your opening line. Understand that your opening chapter's job is to present the tone and to present characters and to get us engaged in them. Don't focus so much on grabbing our attention that you forget about the more important thing, which is making a story that will really engage us.
Yeah, I super agree with that. And to my professor's credit, he told me the most important thing when you're starting a book is your opening line, and then your opening paragraph, and then your opening chapter. And you have that long to really captivate somebody and make them want to keep reading. So I do completely agree with that. A good opening line is a banger. I personally am a big fan. Like, if you hit me with I'm a sucker for a good opening line. It sets the tone, the mood right away. However, you do have to keep going. It's not the only thing that matters. So I think I would agree with that. Also, yeah, don't do that. Your opening line should match the tone of what you're doing. All right, this next one's from Victoria Aveyard. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And let's see, we got some writing tips.
People always ask me for my best writing advice.
Okay.
And I have my go-to answers. But one thing I'm really thinking about today is the importance of staging. Staging is what's happening while the scene is going on. So say you have an action sequence and you want to make it a little more interesting. Why don't you throw a thunderstorm in there? Or you need your characters to have a certain conversation. In the Red Queen series, I think one of the scenes that I really amped up with staging was a certain conversation between Mare and Maven that happened while he was in the bathtub. I originally wrote that scene while they were just sitting across from each other talking, and then I realized this would be a lot more interesting in a different way. I just ran into that again in Realmbreaker 2, where I was having two characters speak to each other, but I realized this would be a lot more interesting if they were doing something in this scene. So she is cleaning blood off of him because he just killed a bunch of people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sitting around having talking heads talk to each other works sometimes. For certain things, it's valuable. But if that's the only thing that you're doing in that scene, what are you accomplishing? Is it enough? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the tone, depends on the story, depends on what's going on. Yeah, no, that's totally a great way to add a little spice to what you're doing. I like that. This next one is from the creators of South Park. What is it? Trey and Matt. These guys are actually some of the punchiest writers, I think, operating today. So I'm very excited to see what they have to say.
The words "and then" belong between those beats. You're f***ed, basically. Okay. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but." Right? So what I'm saying is that you come up with an idea and it's like, okay, this happens, right? And then this happens. No. It should be this happens and therefore this happens. And there's so many scripts we read from new writers and things that we see.
God, I see movies.
And
you see movies that you're just watching. It's like this happened, and then this happens, and then this happens. That's when you're in a movie, just going, "What the f am I watching this movie for?" Just like this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. That's not a movie, you know. That's not a story. Like Trey said, it's those two, but because therefore, that gives you the causation between each beat, and that makes that's a story. Yeah.
I resonate super hard with that. That's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. I think that this is the reason, really, if you break down that like people don't really like the Star Wars prequels, is because a lot of and thens happen. The thing that makes you sucked in, that makes you engaged, right? Like by contrast, say John Wick, they took his dog, therefore he killed them all, right? Like those are the beats, right? There's a few more in between, but there isn't and then. Everything leads into the next thing. That's what makes high octane. That's what really makes things go. I wouldn't have thought to put it that way, but I think that's a brilliant way of putting it. Yes. So far, I mean, listen, all these people that we've gone through so far know what they're doing much better than I do. So like me agreeing with them doesn't really matter. But I thought I would have more like, but yeah, no, these are all great. We got ourselves another Brandon Sanderson. All right, let's see what we got.
Very rarely do you run into trouble when you're doing a plot twist when you give the reader more than they expected. You can run into problems when you give them the substitute. If you do it really well, it doesn't matter. In fact, they like it better. So the substitute plot twist to envision this is you promise your son you're going to give him a toy car. You then spend several months talking about how awesome toy planes are, to the point that your son says, man, I wish I were getting a toy plane. And then they open their box at the end and it's a toy plane. And they're like, yay, toy plane, right? The classic example, one of the best to ever do this, is While You Were Sleeping. It's a fantastic romance story where a woman sees the perfect man. She has a terrible life. She falls in love with him from afar. And then he goes into a coma, and accidentally through hijinks, she maybe says to people she's his girlfriend, and his whole family's like, he never tells us anything, come! And she becomes part of the family. And then she gets in deeper to where you're like, oh man, I wish you hadn't promised us those two would get together, because the promise at the beginning is this perfect man's going to be, her love interest. And you're like, this is getting worse and worse. And in the meantime, she falls in love with his brother, who's a really cool guy and is a great match for her, right? But you don't, the story is, of course, she has to end up with this guy, but of course, at the end, she ends up with the toy plane instead, right?
Okay,
She ends up with the other guy, and it is a brilliant sort of substitution plot, right? Substitution plot generally depends on you convincing the reader that you actually want
substitution plot.
Else. Let's just point this out. Substitution plots can be dangerous this way. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people like it because during the beginning, there's this sense that everything's too perfect. Everything's just not, it's too perfect. Plus,
I actually think I do this a lot.
Killed and be baked into a pie. And then you're like, yes, everyone's getting killed and baked into pies for the second half. But Into the Woods is a really strange example.
Okay, yeah, interesting. There's not a lot to disagree with here. I mean, of course, it's Brandon, right? He knows what he's doing. Substitution plot. That's a really cool word for it. I don't have formal education on a lot of this. I just know what I like. You can do that really right or really wrong. Yeah, you have to convince them that it's better, right? I think substitution plot works where you discover what you're looking for isn't good, right? I think I like that in some place, right? The girl that the main character falls in love, or whatever, it isn't right for them, or is evil, that twitch, and then the nerdy kid gets the in the end. That happens a lot. All right, more George R.R.
I think it'd be fair to say, based on what you just said, that you don't write to a plan. The writing more just, grabs you and you just sort of chase it.
Yes and no. I mean, I do know where I'm going. I
would have guessed he was a plotter, not a pantser.
Know where the story ends. I know the fate of the principal characters. The two kinds of writers, the gardener and the architect. The gardener digs a hole and throws in a seed and sort of waters it with his blood and hopes that something interesting comes out. Now, mind you, the gardener knows certain things. The gardener knows whether he planted a potato or a geranium, but and it would be very surprising if you plant a potato and a geranium comes up. The architect is like an architect planning a building when he plans a novel. He knows how many stories there's going to be and how many windows it's going to have and how
plotter and I literally talked about this
is made of, and he works all of that out and blueprints all of that, or outlines it in the case of a novel before he drives the first nail or writes the first sentence.
Really? That's fascinating. I would have assumed, maybe that's why he hasn't finished, is if you get to that point where there's so much going on, it's much harder to juggle. I don't know. Interesting. I would be in his analogy a gardener as well. I know where I'm going. I know what happens, but and I know the seed that I planted, but I don't know what it's going to look like when it's done completely. We're finding it out together. Okay, interesting.
Hi, I'm Jacinda Wilder, and my writing tip would be a lot like the advice I give about working out, is that there's going to be days you wake up and you really don't want to write, but the important thing is to those days even push yourself a little bit harder, because often those are the days when you have the best writing.
That's true. I agree with that.
Hey everyone, this is Amy Harmon. And my writing tip is to write what you're crazy about, what you're passionate about. And don't worry about if it sells or if it's going to sell or if it's the next popular thing. Just write what you're passionate about.
I agree with that and also disagree with that. I think you should go in eyes wide open, because it depends. If you're trying to do writing as a job, you should have expectations of what people will read, what they won't read. Same thing with as a YouTuber. I don't necessarily make the video I most want to make. I make videos I enjoy making, but I do because I want to be able to pay my bills, right? I think there's a middle ground there, but I agree with the sentiment that best writing comes out of you writing something you're truly passionate about and you not doing it just because you have to. So, and I would say that's true for me and YouTube too, but also if I really wanted to make it just what I wanted to make, it would be it would be whatever captured my interest that day. And then instead of picking things that other people also enjoyed and resonated with. I don't know if that makes sense, but all the same.
Hi, I'm Shay Savage, and my writing tip for everyone today is to write what you know. If you have to spend a whole lot of time researching a particular topic, whether it's a type of character or an activity, you might want to consider going towards something that you are already very familiar with, so you can spend all that time getting the feelings and the emotions of what goes on with that activity instead of researching the basics.
I'm Mia Sheridan, and my writing tip is to pay attention to what you really love to read. Don't worry so much about what people might want or what's popular, because what you're going to do best is what you really love to read, and do it in the way that only you can do it.
I think she said it better than what I said a little bit ago. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but she said it way smarter than I did. I think I was talking about going off the beaten path and just doing like something that's completely unstructured, if that makes sense. I love urban fantasy. I'm inspired by a lot of urban fantasy that's on there back there, and that's why I'm writing it. And I'm not worried about, you know, is it the hottest trend? Is it whatever? I really like it, and that's why we're writing it. I think maybe that's what they were both trying to say, and I misunderstood the first one. Either way, yes, I wholeheartedly agree with this.
My writing tip is to revise a lot. This is the 6th draft that went into final publication. I deleted about 70,000 words and rewrote it, and it ended up winning the Best Erotic Romance Award from RT Book Lovers magazine on the 6th draft. Not the first draft, the 6th draft. So don't be afraid to delete and rewrite.
70,000 is a lot. I have not deleted that much from a book, but I have probably deleted about 20,000. That's a lot. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this like different kind of video, checking out other authors' writing tips, talking about them, thinking about them, talking through. Do you guys agree or disagree? Remember, there's 100 different ways to skin a cat. So even if I didn't agree with somebody completely, doesn't mean it wouldn't work for you. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, comments. Leave them down in the comments below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you again soon.